Hello. This is going to be my attempt at defining what consciousness is. I don't think we can define something in its entirety. We can only perceive things through an aspect of it or part of it, a side of something. If I get into the explanation of why this is, it's just going to be a long talk about circular reasoning, and it's not going to make very much sense. Well, we'll have to go through a lot of things for it to even make some sort of sense. Everything is essentially a paradox, and it's hard to make sense of reality and existence because it's just a paradox. You can pick anywhere to start making sense of it, and you'll never really get the full picture of its entirety unless you accept the fact that it is, it just is. And that's the paradox of reality and existence. But anyways, I'm not going to get into all that stuff with this video. This is just me trying to define how I perceive consciousness, based off of what I've learned and experienced throughout my life. I think Buddha and his understanding of what consciousness and awareness is very enlightening. It's one of the best definitions that I've come across, probably because of just my own, just how I am. It might not relate to other people as well, it might not be as applicable, but science, philosophy, religion, all these different things are defining consciousness in their own way. And if one is able to make the connection between all of these and sort of somehow make sense of it, I think you will have a better understanding of what consciousness is. Anyways, this is just my attempt at bringing a new perspective. Maybe I'm not so sure I don't know if this will be a new perspective. It's just going to be one of the perspectives I've come to realize recently, and that's what I'm going to be going over. Okay, I have a lot of issues. One is dyslexia, and I probably have some form of ADD and other things, but I find it very hard to talk about things. I'm constantly thinking about multiple things. There's always a stream of thoughts going on behind my head, in the back of my head somewhere, and it's very difficult to figure out where to start because you can literally start anywhere, and that's is what makes it confusing sometimes for some people. But anyways, this is me just trying to start somewhere with this trail of thought or my understanding of what consciousness is from a certain perspective. But anyways, I had to write everything all out because Just like now, I'm just going over and over different things, and there's really no start, beginning, or end to it. It's difficult for me to formulate any kind of structural thing when I'm talking about this. This is why I find it a lot more helpful in a sort of conversational format. When I'm talking to someone, I let them decide the subjects or topics we talk about, and I would just go along with that. Sometimes I have my own, but that generally comes from a place where I'm not necessarily thinking about something. It just comes to me, and I just want to talk about this. But the difficulty for me arises when I'm actually trying to do something, and I get so into trying to understand what this thing is that I don't even start anything, and I tend to just ramble on like I am right now. So I wrote down some things. I'm going to start reading it. Hopefully, I can stick to topic, and maybe somebody could understand what it is I'm talking about and make some sense of this. Oh yes, and I also mentioned my dyslexia, or did I? I don't remember anymore. But if I my reading isn't the best, but I have to read this so that it can somehow be in some sort of structure or something that is a little bit more understandable than just me talking. Originally, I thought I would just talk and it would be okay, but I've tried this a few times, and it just is very difficult for me to stick to one thing because my mind just goes everywhere. I start from one point and it just goes into everything, and in the end, I am not very confused, but I'm pretty sure the people who would be watching this would be come lost somewhere along the way. So, anyways, let's begin. What is consciousness? The simple answer is awareness. To break this down a bit, we have to compare it to something, and the best comparison is unconsciousness, because that is the complete opposite of what consciousness is. And we have to look at this comparison through the lens of something other than the two. Consciousness comes in many forms, and you can find the same comparison in everything in terms of consciousness because it's the framework or structure we are choosing to perceive everything through. One example is human consciousness, and human consciousness can be broken down even more. From consciousness as the first form and broken up into two, we have the duality of consciousness and unconsciousness. Now we are trying to break this down even further, but we have to do it through a specific aspect of consciousness. In this case, I chose human consciousness. Human consciousness can be broken down further from just consciousness or unconsciousness and into the three fundamental aspects of the human experience: the heart, mind, and body, the emotional consciousness, the mental consciousness, and the physical consciousness. This process can go on for forever. So we just have to pick a place to start from. The place to start is the subject or topic of your choice. That would be the lens we use to perceive consciousness in a broken down form, and the simplest form would be duality and with its opposing component, counterpart. That way we can see the most differences and we will have more to define what consciousness is if we can define those differences. To give an example, I will use intelligence as a starting point or lens to perceive the duality of consciousness. So I would change the subject from consciousness to intelligence, because you can't define what consciousness is in a meaningful way by just saying it's consciousness. And saying consciousness is consciousness and unconsciousness isn't very meaningful either. You need at least 3 different aspects or components to understand anything in a meaningful way. You need a framework of 2 opposing parts and a separate lens or viewpoint that is not part of the framework. By doing so, all 3 become a whole new framework of understanding all 3 components. So this is why it's so confusing. But before we jump into the framework of all 3, I'll try to just stick with the understanding that we are trying to perceive a form of duality through the lens of something that is not part of the 2. And by defining one part of this dynamic, we can then start to understand the others. It's like trying to define an orange, for example. If you compare an orange to another orange, you won't get a very meaningful answer as to what an orange is. You can describe the differences between the 2 oranges, but when you're asked what is an orange, your answer will still be an orange, because there are only oranges. It's like saying one orange is more of an orange because of the shade of orange it has compared to the other. That isn't a very meaningful comparison. Now, if we were to replace an orange with an apple, we can have more differences between the 2, but it still won't help us define what an orange is, because the fact that it is different from an apple, besides the fact that it is different from an apple, and then we have to define what an apple is, and we hit into the same problem as we do with the orange. But if we introduce the lens or perspective of fruits, then we start to have a bit more sense of things. They are both fruits, but different kinds of fruits. We start to have some kind of awareness of what an orange is. An orange is a fruit that is not an apple. This can then become a framework of its own, and we can add another way to perceive this new framework, such as color. An orange is an orange fruit that is not red like an apple. This can go on for eternity. So it's best to stop at some point and just understand enough where it's useful to you. And that's what we do. So to take this back to where we started, let's try defining consciousness in a meaningful way in its simplest form. To understand what consciousness is, we have to compare it to something else, and perceive it through something that is not consciousness and its counterpart. To do that, I will be using intelligence as the lens to perceive the framework of consciousness and unconsciousness, so I can have some kind of meaningful understanding of what consciousness is. Another point to consider is that I won't be able to perceive exactly what consciousness is, because it's just one perspective. I'm trying to define what consciousness is by comparing it to unconsciousness in the form or context of intelligence. It's ironic that after the whole explanation, I'm just going back to the start and choosing a different subject. Now the question has become, what is intelligence? We have some understanding of what consciousness is by saying it's not unconsciousness, but that isn't very meaningful. But that's what we have to work with for now. We don't know exactly what intelligence is either, but we have some kind of understanding of these things because of what we learn through our experiences of experiencing reality. Now that's going to take us down a whole other rabbit hole. So I'll save you from the boring details and just use the basic understanding of what intelligence is. What is intelligence? Intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge. In this instance, we already have some kind of meaningful understanding of what intelligence is. It might seem a bit cheating to use an already defined definition, but the explanation of how this comes to be is another topic. The simple answer is experience. So now that we understand the lens we are using to some degree, we can then begin to understand the framework or interplay of consciousness and unconsciousness. Both consciousness and unconsciousness has to be intelligent because that's how we are perceiving them. So we have we have conscious intelligence and unconscious intelligence. But what does that mean? Remember, the simple answer for consciousness is awareness. So the conscious intelligence is the intelligence that you are aware of. And the unconscious intelligence is the intelligence that you are not aware of. Let's expand on this further. In this instance, everything we know is intelligent, but each individual thing has a different mix or level of conscious and unconscious intelligence. We are constantly using all the intelligence we are capable of, but we are only aware of our conscious intelligence. This is generally the level at which we define intelligence for ourselves and others, because that is all we are aware of. This is not entirely the entirety of someone's or our own intelligence. It's only just the measurable part of our intelligence. We can only measure others' intelligence to the limit of our own consciousness or awareness. If someone other than ourselves has more conscious awareness that is beyond our own ability to comprehend because we do not have the same amount of conscious awareness. If someone other than ourselves has more conscious awareness that is beyond our own ability to comprehend, is because we do not have the same amount of conscious awareness. So the level of our understanding and the understanding of others is based on the level of consciousness that we have gained through our own experiences. To someone who has more conscious awareness than others, they can then recognize the aspects that the other is not aware of. If we exceed their level of, they're not aware of, if we exceed their level of consciousness. Remember, consciousness comes in every form, so there is always something that we are not aware of that the other is aware of. This is just the aspect of intelligence. Now let's examine the unconscious intelligence. Unconsciousness is highly intelligent, so much so that we aren't aware of it. It's what is keeping us alive because it takes all of our intelligence just to be. The reason for our existence isn't just our conscious intelligence, but the combination of both our conscious and unconscious intelligence. We just don't know what it's doing. By experiencing life and reflecting on our experiences, we begin to understand that which we were not aware of. So we gain consciousness as we uncover and discover things about ourselves and the reality we are experiencing. Our consciousness is continuously growing as we continue to live. The rate at which it grows depends on our lifestyle and ability to reflect and interpret upon different aspects of our lives. In essence, nobody is more intelligent than somebody else. It's only the level of our consciousness that gives the illusion of measurable intelligence. because everything is intelligent. So now that we've explained or expanded on intelligence, we can then try to attempt to define consciousness, at least in a form of intelligence. And that takes us back to the start. What is consciousness? Consciousness, again, the simple answer is awareness. But to describe consciousness in the form of intelligence, it's the level of awareness we have of our own and anything other than our own intelligence. In this sense, it can also be seen as another form of knowledge, the perceivable knowledge that we've uncovered, at least. And intelligence can also be then interpreted as the ability to acquire and apply consciousness. That is at least one aspect of intelligence. Unconsciousness is doing the rest. Whatever it is that we don't know is a form of unconsciousness. And there's a lot of intelligent consciousness that we don't know. Hey, so I don't know if anyone will be able to understand what I was just talking about. But this is just one perspective that I have of what consciousness is. By combining different forms or perspectives of understanding consciousness, we then begin to get a better picture or understanding of what consciousness is. Consciousness is as a whole. And this is a never-ending process. It just goes on and on for forever because life, existence, reality goes on and on and on for forever. So we just have to get to a point of understanding that is meaningful enough and we are able to utilize it in some way or another. And I don't think everybody needs to understand everything or consciousness to a certain degree. It really depends on what you're trying to do, what kind of life you're living. Whatever matters to you is what matters. And if there's something you feel like you're lacking, then look into that. Look into it until you've had enough. Once you hit that point of, I feel like this is good enough, just stop and do something. Do something with that you knew, that you studied and understood for yourself. Yes, and this is my attempt at doing something. So yes, the simple answer, consciousness is awareness.